Good morning, church. We are starting a new series called Keeping Up. Before I start that, I would like to take a moment to introduce our pastoral intern for this year. His name is Lloyd, and he just finished his master's at Tyndale in clinical counseling. So please give him a warm Richmond Hill welcome. So you get to know Lloyd right after service, and he'll be outside greeting you, and as most of the pastors do. We're doing a new series called Keeping Up, and the reason we're doing this series is because we're approaching that month of the year. That month is a strenuous month. It's a tough month. It's an exciting month for some of us. It's the month between Black Friday and Boxing Day. It is a very exciting season. Some of us are getting ready for it, but it's also very dangerous. Now, I'm not going to say that shopping is wrong. I don't want you to come across thinking, oh man, it's one of those guilty kind of sermons. It's dangerous because during this month, your identity is challenged. And your identity is actually compromised more than ever. It's a season when you are bombarded with messages, subtly, subconsciously, consciously, that more is better, that what you have is not enough. You won't be happy unless you have this. And what happens is we end up comparing, we end up feeling entitled, we end up being apathetic about the more important things in life, we end up building up and trying to keep up an image. So the next 4 weeks, what we're going to talk about is how do we overcome these attitudes in our lives? How do we break free from these prisons that have entrapped us? And so this morning, I'm going to talk about comparison, the curse of comparison. Now, comparison is it's a timeless issue. And the reason it's timeless is because it's not an issue of the material, as in what I own or what I do or what I have. It's actually an issue of the spiritual, who I am. It's an issue that touches your heart and my heart. Now, what is different about today and what makes it a very timely issue is that it's easier today to compare than ever before. Now, when I was growing up, I really, one of the first things I remember envying or comparing myself to other people was this product. I think it's, there it is. Now, this was before the sneaker generation, before people love shoes. I was in the back showing our AV guy, Daniel Wong, this, and he was like, oh, those are super vintage and retro. And I said, yeah, well, they were contemporary for me. Okay, 1989, the Reebok Pump was released, and all the cool kids at school had them. Now, I did not have them, so I wasn't super cool. I had some shoes that my parents bought from whatever store they found, and they weren't brand names. And I remember being quite jealous that these kids had these cool shoes. But it really ended there, because when you went home, I never thought about it really again until the next day when I was bombarded with the same message. But the reality is today is a little bit different, isn't it? We have things like the internet where you get ads and web pages that are shown to you every single minute. You have social media, and what social media is really, like a highlight reel of someone's life. It's the best of documentary of someone's life. And so it's easy to compare. It's easy for you and I to look at any social media, any internet ad and say, why wasn't I invited? Why can't I have that? Why do they have such a great life, and why don't I have such a great life? Why can't I have the thing that is being advertised? And I think about this, and I'm a little bit scared for my children, in fact, the next generation even beyond me, because I grew up in a time when this is introduced in my 20s. But my children and your children grow up in a time when they'll never know what it's like to not have these things bombarding their face. When I was really reflecting about this, I think I was probably more content, to be honest, overall, when I didn't have social media. When I wasn't bombarded with news feeds of other people's vacation and their children and their toys and their gadgets, I was happier. And I don't know if you were happier, but I certainly remember a time when life was a little bit more simple. Now, the reason why today is a really difficult time for many people is because we are bombarded with comparison. And the quickest way to ruin something, to be honest, is to compare it to something else. Have you noticed that? The quickest way to ruin something special or meaningful or wonderful in your life is to put it beside something else. And it's not like that thing is even better, to be honest, objectively better. It's in your mind most of the time, but we love to compare, and then we love to have the joy sucked out of us. I have this watch that I purposely wore today I usually wear this watch. It's an Adidas watch, okay? This is before Adidas was super cool. 25 years ago, my cousin bought this for me in Hong Kong, so I don't know if it's even real. But I've worn this watch for 25 years. It's gone through the ringer. I've had parts replaced. Now, is the Apple Watch better? Those have Apple Watches out there. It probably is in many ways. But the question isn't if it's better. Is this watch better for me? I'm sure it has notifications, but I have enough notifications in my life. I don't need... Now, if you have an Apple Watch, don't feel bad, okay? But for me, I'm okay with this watch. But the reality is we all are being forced and told to compare. And this is what this season is you're forced to compare. Marketing firms know that. They force competition. Rodney Clapp once wrote that we have deified dissatisfaction. And what he meant by that was the God we worship is not the God of the Bible, but it is really the God of comparison. The God of comparison. That we are continually dissatisfied, and we are forced into this mold of being dissatisfied with our lives. And when we're dissatisfied, we're unhappy, and we're discontent, you're forced to choose something that will relieve your dissatisfaction. And usually that's tied to a product. Now, whether it's gadgets or vacations or careers, or I would even dare say ministries, I'll have to admit that, even as a pastor, sometimes you look at other people's ministries or look at other people's churches, you can compare very easily. It can be children's behaviors. My son had a sleepover recently, and there's one boy in the sleepover that was so nice and so kind. I was cooking, and he goes, "Hey, can I help you out?" I thought, what kind of generation is this? And in the morning, they stayed up to 12, and in the morning, he got up without me saying a word because his mother had to pick him up early, and because he was responsible. And I remember my wife telling me that, and I was in bed, and the first thing I said under my breath was, "I wish my son was like that." We compare all the time. Because if you put something that is special in your life besides something else, you are going to compare. And it's just not the material things. I read this quote that I found quite impactful to me just because I have 2 girls now, and I was thinking about this. But this is what this woman said. She said, "Comparison taught me that no matter what I did, I would never measure up. I could start wearing makeup and buy the same trendy clothes the other girls had, but it would never be enough to gain their approval." And here's a line that struck me. I felt captive. I felt like a prisoner to this destructive lie that I was not beautiful. And the reality is that what she wrote is true, that it's a lie. And comparison is destructive. It is a joy killer. And it is because when you compare, you're running a race that you simply cannot win. Nor should you be running in the first place. But it is like that image that we showed up in the beginning. It's like you run up that hill and you're always tired, you're never going to catch up. So this morning, I want to ask this question. How do we overcome the curse of comparison? How do we overcome it? I'll give you a few ways. The first way is simply by understanding the types of comparison and being aware of them. Now, if you look at chapter 4 of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, this is the temptations of Jesus. And when you read it, most of us think of Jesus being tempted with comfort, and he was tempted with power, he was tempted with approval. But let me tell you, I want to take it from a different point of view. And the point of view I want to take it from is that Jesus was confronted with counterfeit identities. He knew who he was, but the devil wanted to confront him with false, counterfeit, untrue identities. And he wanted Jesus to buy into these identities. Now, the first identity is this. In verses 2 to 4, the devil confronts Jesus and tempts him and says, "Tell these stones to become breads. Do something. If you're the Son of God, you will do something." And this is the first comparison trap that we fall into, which is this. I am what I do. It is a performance trap. Performance trap. This is the prevalent message that society teaches us, that you are what you do. And that's why we like to size each other up. Right? We like to compare what people do for a living. We like to see how much influence this person has, how high up the corporate ladder they are in the organization. We love to do those kind of things. But Jesus knew that it was dangerous. It's detrimental to do this because once you define who you are by what you do, you're not going to make it through life. Jesus knew that. You're not going to make it because on a very practical note, what you do changes. Whether it's voluntary or involuntary, it will change. I was listening to a podcast, and the person talked about, in preparation for the sermon, talking about different transitions in people's lives. And he said this, and it struck out to me. He said it takes a tremendous amount of courage to step out of your work identity in our culture. And he said, once you lose a job, or you retire from a job, or you transition out of a job, that's why it's a crisis of faith for so many people. He said that people fight this because it's really hard to step away from work identity. And so many of us live in fear and discontentment because we believe in this lie. We look at someone else with certain things in their job, or they get a promotion, they make an X number of dollars, and you're forced to make a comparison if you believe in this lie. And then eventually, when you're stripped away from what you do, you're completely lost because you've believed in this lie. I am what I do. This is a lie of the devil. The second lie of the devil, and it's a comparison trap, is this. I am what others think about me or say about me. This is the pride trap. The devil went to Jesus and he said, if you're the Son of God, throw yourself down. Now, Jesus knew he was the Son of God, but the devil's almost forcing this question in Jesus' mind. Are you truly the Son of God? I am what others think or say about me. A lot of people, they may not know who they are, so they just say to others, you tell me who I am. Now, the problem with this mentality is twofold. Number one, if you rely on this mentality to live your life, when people speak well of you, you tend to feel great about yourself, and it can lead to pride. It can lead to pride because you want others to say good things about you, and inevitably you compare yourself to others. That's why I quoted from C.S. Lewis. He said, it's not really that people are smarter and they're proud or good-looking. It's that they believe that in comparison to someone else, they're proud and better-looking and good. So you can be very prideful. You can't live your life as a very prideful person and feeling superior. Now, on the opposite hand, the other problem is this. If you live your life according to this mentality, if people speak ill of you, you feel miserable. And you can feel even devastated with your life. And have you noticed that if you get 10 compliments, you feel good. But that one negative compliment you get, that's the one that sticks with you. Have you noticed that? You could be at a family dinner and everybody's praising you. And then that Uncle Joe brings up something that's negative about you. And you think about that criticism the entire dinner, right? You and I have all received constructive feedback, but that's the things that you think about. Now, if you let that get to your head, you will be miserable. You will feel inferior. And Jesus knew that. Now, it's important to, I think, care for what people think, and especially because we bear the name of Christ. If you're a Christian, you bear the name of Christ. We want people to think well of Christians, and particularly of Jesus, of course. But Jesus is saying this. You can't base your identity, your essence, your worth on what others people think. Jesus knows that you are not going to make it through life if you fluctuate between feeling superior or feeling inferior all the time. You're not going to make it through life feeling this way. That's no way to live. That's why this is a trap. And some of us live and die by the opinions of others. And it's not just because you're young that you could do this. I know many older people that still are trying to please their parents and the people, their bosses, at such a mature age. It's not just for the young. This is something that all of us struggle with. Now, the third trap is this. I am what I have. This is the possession trap. Verses 8 to 11, basically the devil says to Jesus, he takes him up to a high mountain, he shows him all the kingdoms of the world, and he says, look, if you bow down to worship me, I'll give you all this. I am what I have. This is a possession trap. Now, this is probably the one that we are bombarded with most because, let's face it, it is big business. It is billions upon billions of dollars are spent for you to believe in this lie. And let me just say that businesses are not selling a product as much as they're selling a concept. Right? Whether that concept is love or success or meaning, they're selling it and they're attaching to their product so that you will purchase their product. So whether it's the latest toy or technology or fashion, I would even dare say relationships like, girlfriend, boyfriend. Jesus says, look, it's a trap. It's a trap to feel this way. Because why? Because you're never going to have enough. Never enough. You're never going to have enough money. You're never going to have enough followers. You're never going to have enough shoes or gadgets or attention or success. It's never going to be enough if you believe in this. So you have three traps here. You have the performance, you have the pride trap, you have the possession trap. Let me ask you this question. What counterfeit identity has drawn you in? You know, what trap have you bought into, and what have you sunk deep into? And all of us, I think, by the way, we cycle between the three. All of us have bought into these lies. I mean, if the devil had better tools, he would have used them. But he used his best tools on Jesus. Now, Jesus did it the right way, but many of us fall by the wayside because of these traps. So let me just let you pause in your mind for a second and think about which is the one that really, really traps me. I mean, I'm really struggling through this. Now, let me tell you, the person next to you is probably struggling through the exact same thing. Or if they're not struggling through that, they're probably struggling through another one. Because these are all things that we struggle with. Now, here's what you need to know. Whatever the case, whatever trap you fall into, here's a mathematical certainty. And I even put in a graph for all of us, okay? When comparison increases, contentment decreases. When comparison increases, now I had to put the numbers in physically to make this, okay? So please praise this graph. But I think in terms of I have a science background, so I think in terms of these kind of, but I thought, yeah, this is true. When contentment goes up, when comparison goes up, your contentment goes down. It's always the case. When you compare yourself, you're always going to go down eventually. Now, at first you might feel good because you feel superior, you feel better, you have better things, but it's never enough, and it'll eventually go down. Now, I'll give you a few reasons why this is true. Number one, comparison is addictive. It's like a drug. Once you jump into this comparison mode, it is unceasing. It is relentless. It pursues you. And when something is addictive, it becomes exhausting. It takes an enormous amount of energy for you to maintain these identities, for you to catch up, to keep up. It takes a tremendous amount of energy. And you know what takes even more energy? Maintaining these negative feelings that come with this. And I'm talking about jealousy, and I'm talking about envy. When you compare, those are the two primary feelings you're going to get in your heart. Now, they're a little bit different. Envy is coveting something someone else has. Jealousy is fearing that what you have might be taken away. But whatever term you use, you feel this way, and you have spent a lot of energy maintaining not just the identity, but trying to keep these feelings at bay. And it drains your life, and you're almost at a state of paralysis where you can't move on to better things because you're just spending so much time keeping up. That's why Proverbs 14:30 says this: "A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones." Now, this is a really pithy, interesting statement. What the author is saying is this: bones are the structural support for the body. It gives the body shape and form. So the Bible says that when you compare, and then comparison comes out in envy, and it comes out in jealousy, it's like a disease to your bones. It literally destroys your foundation. It destroys your foundation. B.C. Forbes, who's a Scottish journalist, he said, jealousy is mental cancer. He said, jealousy is mental cancer. Cancer is when the body's cells begin to divide without stopping, and it spreads to the surrounding tissues. And that's why comparison really can ruin your life. And it will ruin your life because it spreads everywhere. It goes from the core all the way to the outside, and it affects everything. And that's why I've always thought, there's two words in the English language that by themselves are neutral. They're inert. But you put these two words together, and they become a bomb in your life. And here are the two words: if only. If only. And you just add a few more words to that, and you see what I'm saying. Because if you say, if only I was prettier, if only I was smarter, if only I had more money, I was wealthier, if only I had more of this, more of that, if I had better ministry, I had a better church, my life would be great. It would be perfect. It would be whatever word you want to fill in. And God knows that. Look, God knows that if you live your life wondering if only, you're not going to make it through life. You will not make it through life if you're thinking that. And that's why the Bible's primary message is actually this: don't bother. Don't bother with comparison. Solomon said this, "It is useless." I mean, I like Solomon, he's so blunt. It's useless. It's chasing the wind. Have you ever tried to chase the wind? Right? You look pretty silly if someone videotaped you trying to chase the wind, right? But Solomon is saying a lot of us chase the wind. And he says it's better to be satisfied with what you have than to always be wanting something else. And this is a man who had everything. He said it's vanity, it's useless, it's meaningless to chase after the wind, to compare yourself like that. Paul said it this way in 2 Corinthians. He said, look, but they are only comparing themselves with each other, using themselves as a standard of measurement. How ignorant. And what's Paul saying there? This, especially the second line. Paul is saying, he's saying this, it's foolish to use external means to measure inherent worth. Let me repeat that. It is foolish to use external means to measure inherent worth. Because at the end of the day, here's the question you should be asking yourself. Who or what is going to define your worth? Who or what gives you value? And what Paul is saying, what Solomon's saying, and what God is saying is this. When you measure your worth according to external standards, like what people think of you, what you do or do not have, you are running a race you simply cannot win. Because, and I'll give you few practical reasons I thought of. Number one, people are fickle. Their opinions change all the time. Their way of measuring success changes all the time. You and I change all the time. Our feelings towards things change all the time. And I thought here's even the biggest one of all that affects all of us is this. It's going to go one day when you die anyway. Everything that you've accumulated in your life, every external thing that is precious and dear to you, it's going to go anyways. And that's why when you go to a hospital and people are dying, it's a frightening experience for them, obviously, but it's also for you because you're starting to think, look, one day, if all of this is stripped away, who am I? Who am I? If everything is stripped away from me, who am I? Look, Paul says this in 1 Corinthians. I want to take you to 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 21 to... And I put I didn't do the whole thing, but a few verses up there. And it says, Paul is talking about not boasting. So then no more boasting about human leaders. He said, don't look up to human leaders and boast about them. He says, all things are yours, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or present or future, all are yours. He says, and you are of Christ. And Christ is of God. Now, he goes on and then he says this. He concludes by, now knowing that you belong to Christ, you are of Christ, what does he say? He says in verses 3 and 4 of the next chapter, I carry very little. If I'm judged by you or by any human court, indeed I do not even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. It is the Lord who judges me. Now what Paul is saying is very simple. He's saying that you have to come to a place, if you want to beat the curse of comparison, you have to come to a place where your identity is not based on the judgment of others, the verdict of others, or the judgment of yourself, self-judgment. He says instead, you have to rest your identity firmly on Jesus. You have to, as the writer of Hebrews says in chapter 12, fix your eyes on Jesus. Don't fix your eyes inwardly. Don't fix your eyes towards the outside people. Fix your eyes outward towards Christ alone. Look, if you look outwardly, you're running a race you can't win, right? Because there's always going to be someone who's better or stronger or more attractive. Okay? There's always going to be people that simply will beat you. And if you are looking for them, at them, to judge your inherent worth, it's a race you're never going to win. If you look inward, well, you say that's a little bit better. I'm going to tell myself who I am, but it's based on how you feel and who you are and your own judgments. And we all know that the best person that we lie to is ourselves. And so sometimes your feelings are deceiving and your heart is deceiving. So you have to look at Jesus. We can stop comparing when we can look at Jesus. Because why? Because Jesus already won the race for us. He went to the cross for us. The God of the cosmos, the God of the universe, the God of every galaxy that ever was made accepts and loves you as you are. Because if you think about it, and I want to pause for you to think about this for a sec, the reason why we compare in the first place is is really because we're searching for acceptance. You and I are searching for love, for meaning. And that's why it's so important to focus on Jesus, because what he thinks of you is the most important. And when you are focused on Jesus, what happens next? Well, you're less focused on what other people are saying or doing or buying or thinking. You were created for God and by God. And you were created for a specific reason that only you could fulfill in God's economy and God's kingdom. So let me just put it this way. Focus on Jesus, and here are some of the more of the practical things. Run your own race. You let other people run their race, and you run your own race. Now, you notice there's these new cars out there, and there's something called lane assist. I don't know if you have this kind of car, but when you're going above 60, lane assist helps you by, I feel like a car salesman, by not letting you drift into other people's lanes, right? So if you're falling asleep at the wheel, or you just, it gets mad at you, right? Beep, 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 and then you go back in. Some of us need lane assist here, because all we're doing is trying to get into people's lanes and beating them and cutting them off. Some of us need lane assist here. You run your own race, you let the other person run theirs. And in fact, I would say this: you should celebrate what God is doing in their life. And you celebrate what God is doing in your own life. Now, how do you celebrate? I would say the first thing to do is acknowledge there is a complexity, a diversity, a deepness to life that you and I will simply never understand with our human intellect. Because a lot of times we compare because we think we have the full picture. And we get jealous of people that do not fit into the mold that I'm in. But instead, I believe the better thing is not to judge them and to curse at them or to think about them, but really just to celebrate what God is doing in their life. Because God gives different talents and abilities to other people that you and I simply don't have. So it's almost like, why waste the energy comparing when they're running a different race than I'm running? I celebrate what God is doing in my life, and I'm content in letting them celebrate what God is doing in their life. And I celebrate with them. Are you known for comparing or celebrating? That's a good question and a good gauge. See, some of us really need to, I would say, number 3, confess or comparison to God. You need God's help. I need God's help to do this. Because this is such a powerful thing in your life that you really do need to cry out to God, and you need help from other people for you to start celebrating and stop comparing. Now, I know this is difficult, but one practical suggestion I have for you is something that I found helpful is actively use your language and your words to build up other people. You know what I mean by that? Sometimes you say, well, I need to feel like, at peace before I can even say something. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you got to force yourself to start practicing, and then the feelings come, yes? What I mean by this is no snarky remarks, no gossip, no passive-aggressive jabs, right? And I'm guilty of this as much as the next person, is that when people tell me good things about their life, your mind starts thinking, and you start thinking about you start comparing. So the guy says, hey, I got a new car. It's a Porsche. What do you think immediately? You think, well, it's good. Well, good for you, right? I'm going on vacation. I'm going to Bora Bora. And what are you thinking? Well, I'm going to Kingston, Ontario. I just did a trip out there last week. But you know what I'm saying. You can have these snarky remarks that are just at the tip of your tongue. You just want to say it. And I've said them before, okay? But the reality is, if there's something you admire about them, just encourage them. Wish them well. Pray for them. If there's something that you really don't admire, wish them well anyways. Pray for them. Don't pray that they get into an accident with their car or their Bora Bora vacation gets canceled. Just pray for them and, hey, wish you the best. Just be happy for them. Because what I find is when you do that, you're going to start your attitude slowly changing. I've noticed that in my life as well. And not to say you're faking it, I'm super happy for you. But, okay, I don't do that, right? But pray for them and then ask God for help to change that attitude in your own life. Look, I would say number 5 is this is really important. Look for things that trigger your comparison. Because sometimes it's just not smart to go into certain situations knowing that you're going to be forced to make a comparison. Right? If you're going into social media all the time and every time, you're just scrolling through Instagram all the time, of course you're going to feel a certain way. So maybe you should just shut that off for a season of your life. Or maybe you take a break from a certain group that encourages us. In fact, I would say the opposite. You should spend time with people that really model humility. They do not compare. They're very secure, and they simply love and celebrate, and they run their own race. They're not jealous. They're not, they're not vengeful. They're just good, mature folks in your small group in this church. People that, because once you start hanging with them, you realize that you can drop the pretenses because they don't care about those things. They value you because they value you, not because of what you have or because they've made a comparison. And I find when you hang around people more and more like that, the seeds of pride start dissolving a little bit. And I think that's really important. So, hang around people that have a grateful spirit and attitude, and people that are they're just thankful for the small blessing. Hang around those folks, and then you're going to notice your life change a little bit. But I wanted to give you a few practical things because it's one thing to say just to beat this comparison, and I've given you the big picture. But here are a few practical things. Now, in conclusion, let me just simply say this, and this is a challenge for all of us. I thought, how am I going to conclude the sermon? Let me just say it with 4 words. We are the church. And I want to leave you with this image because the church is the body of Christ. And the body of Christ is very unique. Jesus died for his body, and everybody plays a part in this body. Jesus knew that. There is no superior or inferior part. There are parts, every part is unique, every part is valuable, and every part is different. And so if you believe that you are part of the church, you're part of the body of Christ, the family of God, the temple of the Holy Spirit, then you simply run your race. And you shouldn't be jealous or prideful or paralyzed by comparison. You should be able to celebrate the differences within this body. And let me just leave you with this thought. If there is a place where comparison should end, it should be the church. Think about that. If there's a place where we should drop the pretenses and the judgment and the envy and the jealousy, it needs to be the church. It should be, it needs to be the church.